Hello everyone, Andy Schwab here with your Northern Ag TV. Well, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association Annual CattleCon 2026 drew record numbers in Nashville, Tennessee this past week. More than 9,400 cattle producers and industry leaders attended the event, making it the largest ever. NCBA President Buck Werbine says the turnout reflects strong producer commitment to advancing beef demand and shaping policy for the next generation. Now, kicking off the convention, NCBA released their 2026 policy priorities with a focus on producer profitability. Key issues, that is, included rolling back harmful regulations, expanding beef exports, strengthening animal health protections, and maintaining strong consumer demand for beef. CattleFax also delivered its annual market outlook, signaling that there's a cattle cycle, that may be starting to turn. Analysts say that the tight cattle supplies and record beef demand are supporting prices into the new year. Now, cow-calf producers are also expected to maintain the strong leverage with steady to higher cattle prices forecasted. Ethan Lane, NCBA's Vice President of Government Affairs, told me at the annual NCBA convention last week that 2025 was a huge victory year for the cattle producers across the nation, with wins on taxes and beef demand.
By and large, on the legislative side, those wins early in the year really were helpful, cleared the decks a little bit so that we could focus on some of the, the challenges that we saw later in the year, right? Dealing with this New World screwworm threat that is just persistently sort of blanking at the southern border. Obviously a lot of conversations with the White House and their team about the cost of beef. We were really pleased to see producers around the country stand up and talk about how proud they are for the demand they've built, the relationship they've built with consumers over decades of hard work, both in the checkoff and out in the meat cases around the country, building that research record that led to those dietary guidelines wins, flipping that pyramid, putting beef at the center of the plate, doubling that protein intake for the day. You don't do that overnight. You don't fall backwards out of a pickup truck and score those kind of wins. Those are built with the hard work of the 9,000 people in this building year over year over year to make sure that those wins are a reality, and we were delighted to be able to help facilitate that in Washington.
Along with NCBA's policy priorities for 2026, Ethan Lane and his team are keeping a close eye on the midterm elections. He says it does shorten the elected officials' time to pass critical legislation, but they know it's all part of the process.
We know what that calendar looks like. We know that right now those members are thinking about polling and what those elections are going to look like. And by June, they're going to have those results. They're going to have some bank account totals, and they're going to be ready to sprint because they're going to need to tell everyone listening to this right now why they deserve to be reelected. No matter where you are in the country, somebody with a congressional pin's coming your way to tell you what a great job they've done. And it's going to be really important that our producers around the country are armed with some responses to that and to meet them on that playing field, because what they're not going to be doing during that process is doing a lot of work in Washington.
Now, one particular race they're going to be keeping in mind is going to be one in our neck of the woods, with U.S. Representative Dusty Johnson out of the Mount Rushmore state announcing his run for the governor's seat in South Dakota. Of course, Johnson has been a strong seat on the U.S. House Ag Committee, and Lane hopes to see that seat filled with a good replacement.
And that's really going to represent a brain drain on Capitol Hill of that ag leadership. We are not a big industry, even though we cover most of the country. We need those voices that are speaking for rural America, that are speaking for farmers and ranchers around the country, and doing so with the knowledge of what we actually do every day. And Dusty Johnson was certainly one of those. Some good folks in that race that we know are looking at that seat.
In other big news from NCBA last week, the Public Lands Council and the Bureau of Land Management announced an MOU to help promote grazing allotment cooperative monitoring. PLC Executive Director Kaitlynn Glover told me that this is a great opportunity for ranchers to be in a leadership role.
The MOU allows permittees to go and gather their rangeland monitoring data that they do anyway, and then put that into a package that then they can give to their BLM RangeCon or give to their local office, and have that included in the file to help the agency make decisions about how that land is going to be managed in the year to come. What that means is that we have some protocols, we have some expectations for how that data is gathered, making sure that it's accurate, making sure that it fits legal and regulatory obligations. But really what it's doing is allowing ranchers to be in a leadership position in rangeland health, supported by the BLM, filling gaps that the BLM might not be able to perform themselves, so that you really have a full team approach to rangeland health.
Now, PLC is also going to be keeping a heavy focus on the latest edition of the public lands rule, which Glover said was illegally added during the Biden administration.
Congress was really intentional in making sure that multiple use, multiple considerations would have equal bearing under the law on these public lands. It doesn't mean that one use is more important or receives more time or more deference on the land. It means that it's a balance. That goes for recreation, that goes for grazing, that goes for all of these other uses. And so this public lands rule created an imbalance, put one use or one consideration over the others. And regardless of what that use would be, PLC had some pretty significant concerns. In this case, BLM both illegally restructured that prioritization, but then also made conservation itself a use, taking conservation out of all of the other multiple uses, which is not only counter to history, but also not included in the law. And so what we have done is work with the Trump administration to be really clear that this rule needs to go away and that we need to have a structure and we need to return to a structure that manages multiple use in balance, allows the multiple uses to work together, and gives agency officials the tools that they need to be able to make those determinations on a local level.
Well, that's going to do it for today's Northern Ag TV. I'm Andy Schwab. Have a great rest of your day.